My name is Monisha Harrell, and I'm the Senior Deputy Mayor of the City of Seattle. Though I wish it were under different circumstances, I'd like to welcome you all to beautiful Cary Park in the city of Seattle, Washington. After 49 years, the Supreme Court is trying to turn back the clock. In a leaked ruling, they claim there is no historical basis for protections regarding reproductive health. How far back in history are they willing to go to determine the historic rule of land? Obergefell, 2015. Roe, 1973. Of course, that's where we are. Loving, 1967. Voting rights, 1965. Civil rights, 1964. Suffrage, 1923. It reminds me of a quote from Thomas Jefferson. I am not an advocate for frequent changes in laws and constitutions, but laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, as new discoveries are made, new truths discovered, and manners and opinions change, with the change of circumstances, institutions must advance, also to keep the pace with the times. We might as well require a man to wear still the coat which fitted him when a boy, as a civilized society, to remain under the regiment of their barbarous ancestors. Barbaric. Those are Thomas Jefferson's words, not mine. Today I am sad and angry for those across our country who will be less safe and secure because our barbarous Supreme Court is out of step with our progress. Seattle will remain a city that ensures all have access to reproductive freedom. And we welcome those who need a safe, secure place to exercise their rights. Who you see behind me are those electeds, legislators, and leaders who stand with us in this fight to ensure that Seattle and Washington State will remain a place that is safe for all. And it is with great pleasure I introduce our governor, a strong fighter for all human rights, Governor Jay Inslee.
Thank you, Monisha. Thanks for your mayor doing off to a great start. Trudy and I have come here to say something very simple, and that is this. Washington State was a pro-choice state. Washington State is a pro-choice state, and we are going to fight. We are going to fight like hell to keep Washington a pro-choice state. That's why we're here today. And we understand the nature of the challenge. That's how we have to fight. And the reason is the forces of oppression who want to have the government intrude in Washingtonians' most private decision are after the right of women to have access to abortion in our state. And we understand why we have to act. We cannot rely on the Court of Appeals. We cannot rely on the U.S. Supreme Court. We are the ones who will protect the right of choice because we know what is soon to be shredded in the U.S. Supreme Court, we will protect in the ballot box in the state of Washington. Now, sometimes we could become a little bit complacent over the last 5 decades of protection. But I'm here to sound a warning bell. People need to know in our capital, in our beautiful, blessed capital in Olympia, Washington, one party in the most recent years have introduced 40 bills to take away a woman's right of choice. In the last go-around, every single Every single Republican legislator voted to protect a woman's right of choice. We have to act in the state of Washington to protect Washingtonians' rights, men and women. This is our obligation, and we will fulfill it. So there's three things we need to do in the upcoming months. We know that there are folks, places in the United States who would like to jeopardize the right of choice in Washington state, even for their own citizens. We will explore and act appropriately to provide sanctuary for those American citizens who in Washington state exercise the right of choice, because we will not allow the tentacles of Texas to get into Washington state. This is an action that we will take. Second, we will explore the appropriateness of a constitutional protection under the Constitution of the state of Washington. And third, we want to make sure we will have adequate resources to provide abortion services for people who come to Washington state. They will be welcome and they will be served. Now, I want to thank our Washington legislators who have already acted in this regard. They provided some additional funding this year for Planned Parenthood. They made it clear that we will not be able to use the courts of Washington state to intrude on a woman's right of privacy. Can we give a round of applause for the folks who supported that effort in the Washington state legislature? So this is not a moment for passivity. It is not a moment for simple anger. It is not a moment for pounding the desk. It is a moment for voting. And I hope that we'll make sure that we do that. That's fundamentally what we need to do in the state of Washington. Now, we have some great leaders here today. One is Jennifer MARTINEZ, the chair of the board of Planned Parenthood, who is doing so much in the first state in the United States to have voted for the right of choice so many decades ago. Jennifer MARTINEZ, come on up.
Thank you so much, Governor Inslee. Let's see if we can get this to stay here. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, all. My name is Jennifer MARTINEZ, and I'm standing before you today on the lands of the Coast Salish, Stillaguamish, Duwamish, and Suquamish nations. I am a first-generation Idahoan, a proud daughter of immigrant parents, and this is the second time in my life that I've been able to call Washington State my home. I'm a daughter, a sister, an aunt, and I'm about to be a first-time parent. I'm also a person who chose to have 2 abortions in my early 20s. I was young, freshly out of college, and working my first professional job. I ended up with 2 unplanned pregnancies within a year of each other, and I was not ready to be a parent. I was in a new relationship, not financially stable, and I was most definitely not emotionally prepared to become a parent. Thankfully, I was able to access safe and legal abortions at the Planned Parenthood Health Center in Spokane, Washington, with zero judgment and with the healthcare providers focusing on my health and ensuring I had the information to make the best decision for myself. Because I was able to access this crucial component of healthcare, because yes, abortion is essential healthcare, I was able to continue pursuing my career, working professionally in the political arena and the social justice realm for the last 12 years. Advocating for reproductive health care and justice, and specifically for safe and legal abortion access, has become a core part of who I am as an advocate and as an organizer. So much that one of the greatest honors of my life so far is the opportunity to chair the board of directors for Planned Parenthood Alliance Advocates, who serves not only Washington State, but also Alaska, Hawaii, Idaho, Indiana, and Kentucky, allowing me to pour back into an organization that poured into me when I needed them the most. None of this could have been accomplished if I had been forced to carry those pregnancies to term against my choice. And because I had the right to make the choice to have those abortions in my early 20s, I was able to make a different choice at 34 years old to become a parent for the first time. This is not a decision that can be made by elected officials or by the courts. This decision is intimate, it is huge, and it is not without consequence. So to have that right simply taken away is not only devastating, it is abhorrent. But let me assure you, it is only going to make me fight even harder to ensure our generation and the generations to come have this right protected. So they no longer have to keep fighting for basic human rights. Abortion can never be taken away. All this decision serves to do is to make abortion less safe for those who seek it, and the impacts will disproportionately be felt by those from historically marginalized identities and communities, Black, Indigenous, Latino, and other people of color. The leaked decision alludes to going back to our country's foundation and honoring those values. The reversal of Roe v. Wade and the impact are a testament to the legacy and racism of discrimination in this country. So let me ask you, are those the values that you want our country to uphold? No. I didn't think so. We all know someone who's had an abortion, for whatever reason. Even if you think you don't know someone, the statistics suggest you do know someone and love someone who has had an abortion. My story is not unique, but stories like mine must be heard and shared. We must humanize this conversation and understand the very real consequences this decision could have. The moment is now for all of us to mobilize, to show up, to make our voices be heard. But remember, as of right now, abortion is still legal. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for letting me share my story with you today. Next up, I'm going to turn it over to Attorney General Bob Ferguson, who has worked tirelessly, he's worked tirelessly to preserve legal access to abortion. Thank you so much, Attorney General.
Please give a big round of applause for Jennifer for sharing her story and for your wonderful work on behalf of women across this state. Let's be clear about this draft opinion that has been made public. It is extreme, it is radical, it is wildly out of step with the views of the American people, and it removes and reverses decades of legal precedent relied upon by millions and millions of women in this country. It is outrageous, and we will not accept it. So I know, and you know, that Washingtonians are outraged by this opinion. And I know that many of you and many others across our state are scared about the implications of this opinion. That outrage is more than justified. But I want to be very clear and reassure them, Washingtonians' fundamental right to access safe and legal abortion is not in jeopardy from this opinion. In 1991, by a vote of the people of Washington state, the people of this state passed the Reproductive Privacy Act protecting the right to choose here in Washington state. As a result, that state law, adopted by the people, is stronger than any federal protections. In other words, this draft opinion, as outrageous and extreme as it is, does not outlaw abortion, and thanks to our voter-approved initiative here in Washington state, abortion is still legal here. We are going to, in my office, it is our job, it is our duty to defend acts taken by our legislature or acts taken by the people through the initiative process. And I can assure you, in no uncertain terms, that my office will do everything in our power to protect and preserve this fundamental and important legal right and protect the rights of anyone who wants to come here to Washington state to access reproductive health care. My Solicitor General, Noah Purcell, he clerked on the U.S. Supreme Court. He clerked for Justice Souter. He knows how radical and extreme this draft opinion is. He'll be helping to lead our team with Colleen Melody, the head of my civil rights team, to make sure we take every possible step to protect your rights. One thing I want to add about this draft opinion, by the way, if you allow me just to speak as a lawyer for one more minute. Look, this draft opinion suggests that we do not have fundamental rights in this country, that you and me, that we do not have fundamental rights in this country as Americans unless that is specifically written in a document that is 200 years old. That includes now, presumably, the right to privacy, the right to parent, the right to marry, and the right to choose. That is not acceptable. That is not a correct interpretation of our Constitution. My office will fight back against this extremism whenever it threatens Washingtonians. I'll give you one example. Missouri has proposed legislation that makes it a crime for someone in Missouri to travel to another state to have an abortion. And you know that will not be the only state that proposes such legislation. If Missouri or any other state passes such an unconstitutional law like this, and it affects Washingtonians, we will challenge it in court, and I can assure you we will win. So I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. It's now my great honor to introduce someone you all know, a congresswoman who fights for rights, including the right for reproductive freedom and choice, and that's Congresswoman PRAMILA JAYAPALIO. Give it up for PRAMILA.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Attorney General, and thank you, Governor, and every elected official that is here at every single level for making Washington State a state where reproductive freedom is a right, and we will fight to protect that right. So I'm here today not only as a member of Congress, but also as one of the 1 in 4 women across this country who has had an abortion. And when I spoke about this in 2019, I hadn't talked about it for 15 years. My mother didn't even know. And I spoke about it not because I wanted to, but because I felt that it was absolutely critical that we tell the stories. And I want to thank Jen MARTINEZ for sharing her story today. It was so powerful, and it humanizes, as she said, the decisions that we make as pregnant people. And let's be really clear. Those decisions are decisions that nobody else has the ability to make or the responsibility to make. This is our decision and the decision that we share with our doctors and anyone else that we want to bring in. And so I feel that it is incredibly important that we continue, when possible, to tell these stories because they're all different. And I was only the second member of Congress ever to talk about having an abortion. I know I'm not, and now there's more, thank goodness. And when you hear Barbara Lee talk about when she went to Mexico to have her abortion because it was not legal, it was pre-Roe, it was not legal, we know that we cannot go backwards. If this opinion comes to pass, it will be the most horrific and unprecedented rollback of women's rights in our history. The leaked draft opinion is a radical, outrageous, and deeply dangerous opinion. The culmination, by the way, of decades of insidious work from Republicans and the extreme right who have rigged the system in their favor. And if this radical majority of the Supreme Court, and let's just be clear, these 5 justices were appointed by 2 Republican presidents who were elected by a minority of the American people. So if this radical majority of the Supreme Court has no respect for precedent, no respect for women and the freedoms that now 2 generations of people have grown up believing are settled law, then let's be clear that we can't trust the Supreme Court on any decision we thought was settled. And that's why we can't sit back and rest in the despair or the anger or the frustration that we're all feeling today. We have to organize. We have to elect the majorities that will allow us to restore our Supreme Court and our democratic institutions. And the stakes are high, because if we don't, This radical Supreme Court won't stop at abortion. As you heard Manisha say, as you heard our Attorney General say, there is a straight line from upending abortion rights to getting rid of access to contraception, to banning gay marriage, and our low-income communities, our black and brown communities, our LGBTQ communities will be the ones who pay the steepest price, because abortion won't go away, but safe and legal abortion will, endangering millions of people. So, we are in the fight of our lifetimes. There is no more time for platitudes or half-baked promises. We need action to protect our constitutional right to choose. And if the Supreme Court does decide to overturn Roe, we have to mobilize and fulfill our promise to the people and go out to the ballot box. But in the meantime, Marilyn and I and our entire Democratic delegation in the House has voted to pass the Women's Health Protection Act in the House of Representatives. And Senate Majority Leader Schumer has committed to bring a piece of legislation to the floor that will codify Roe. The people will have a chance to hear from their senators. And yes, we should make an exception to the filibuster. I believe we should eliminate the filibuster, but at least let's make an exception to the filibuster and pass that piece of legislation. And in the meantime, we need to take this to the voting booth. We need to make sure that we are doing everything we can at the ballot box and in the streets. And now it is my incredible honor to introduce a great representative for the state of Washington, one of my colleagues in the House of Representatives, Representative Marilyn Strickland.
Well, thank you very much, Congresswoman Jayapal, and thank you, Governor Inslee, for arranging this event. Access to reproductive health care, including safe and legal abortion, is in jeopardy.
Just stand closer to the mic.
Can you hear me now? Okay, take it from the top. Access to reproductive health care, including safe and legal abortion, is in jeopardy. As you've heard earlier, abortions aren't going to go away, but we want people to be safe, and we want them to have legal access. And if this is truly a final decision, the Supreme Court of the United States has taken our nation in the wrong direction, risking not only the lives of women, but all Americans. Regulating access to reproductive health care is about one thing and one thing only: the control and policing of women's bodies. And the impact of this decision will fall hardest on the people who already face discrimination in the healthcare system: people of color, people with disabilities, people in rural communities, young people, undocumented people, and those who have difficulty making ends meet. If you think about this, yes, this is a healthcare issue, but this is a social justice issue. This is an economic justice issue. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep up this fight. As we look toward the future, we have a responsibility to use every single tool at our disposal to protect your right to make your own decisions about your body free of intrusion. Decades of attacks have left abortion rights hanging by a thread in the U.S., and I'm proud to have voted for the Women's Health Protection Act, and I will keep fighting until every person, no matter where we live, who we love, how much money we make, or what we look like, has the freedom to make our own choices about our bodies. And make no mistake, this is a door that is swung wide open. First, it's abortion rights. They already ruined voting rights. Loving v. Virginia, the ability to have an interracial marriage. Gay rights. Brown versus Board of Education. Sounds far-fetched, doesn't it? Have you heard of critical race theory? So as we look at the different rights that are in jeopardy right now, understand that we will always stand tall for reproductive rights so that everyone has a choice over their body. It's so incredibly important. But this is where elections matter. As Tina Pawlowski often says, don't agonize, organize. We need to show up, we need to get our friends to vote, and we need to make sure that we have, in the U.S. House of Representatives and in the U.S. Senate, people who understand how important this sacred right is. If we do not do this, every promise that we have as a country, to have a country that is here for everyone, that's inclusive, is going to be in jeopardy. So thank you for the chance to be here today, and now I'm proud to introduce my friend, King County Executive Dow Constantine.
Thank you, Marilyn. Well, I'm disgusted. But I'm not surprised, and I bet you're not either, by this deeply troubling revelation of the Supreme Court majority's plan, their strategy to overturn Roe versus Wade. Their idea is that your rights count only, and I quote, if they are deeply rooted in this nation's history and tradition. That is an insult to centuries of progress that we have made together. And they are setting the table to erode every right we have established since the Constitution was adopted. Do you want me to start rattling off the outrages and atrocities that are deeply rooted in our nation's history and tradition? Yes. What about your right to vote if you're not a white male landowner? What about your right to marry the person you love? What about your right not to be enslaved or your right not to be massacred? Deeply rooted. That cannot be the standard. That cannot be the standard. Words that were cast in stone in amber 250 years nearly ago cannot be the standard for how we interpret our Constitution in the 21st century. And we're not going to let this extremist court, carefully, cynically constructed over 2 decades, over contested elections, over those few hundred votes in Florida, over the Russian interference and the outright misogyny in 2016. We're not going to let this Supreme Court take us backwards and undo the settled law of the land. I mean, as was mentioned, these justices, this majority, the person who authored this leaked opinion, they were appointed by presidents who did not receive a majority of the popular vote, one of whom actually tried to lead a coup against the government of the United States. Now, just as we here in King County let science lead our response to COVID, my administration will continue to center public health in our approach to reproductive care. See, it's a little old-fashioned, but here in King County, and yes, Governor, in Washington State, we believe in science. And we believe that evidence-based sex education helps prevent unintended pregnancies and sexual violence. And we will stand with women across this county, across this state, and across this country against government-mandated pregnancy. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. There are going to be difficult days ahead. We're going to lose some skirmishes, maybe lose some battles. But we will not let them win. The right of Americans to control their own bodies. That is what we are fighting for, and more than that. Because we know from history that when abortion becomes illegal, it becomes unsafe, and that jeopardizes the lives of women everywhere. We know who this ruling will hurt the most. It's the women and families who have the least. Criminalizing abortion will fuel the cycle of poverty and economic oppression for generations. So, join in this fight. Let's stand up for the rights of women, of all Americans. We are going to commit in King County every resource we can to helping those who need reproductive care here in our community, and we will welcome women traveling here from across the country who cannot get care in their own communities. We will welcome them with open arms. Because that's who we are. That's who you are. We are a community that fights to make tomorrow better than today, that believes in science, that believes every woman has the right to decide her own future. And to this extremist Supreme Court majority, from the 70% of Americans who rightly believe, that abortion can and must be safe and legal. You want to fight? You got it. And now it is my honor to introduce to you three women who fight for us in the state legislature every single day. Three powerful legislators, Speaker Lori Jenkins, Representative Milin Tai, and Senator Rebecca Saldana.
Hello, Washingtonian.
Hello.
Wherever you are, whether you're here with us in community, or you couldn't make it here with us physically, Washingtonian, I want you to know that your state legislator, your state representative, your state senator hear you, and we are with you. My name is Milin Tai. I have the honor to represent the Legislative District 41, still being the only refugee representing in Washington's legislature, the woman who believe that science lead the way, and as a healthcare provider, I'm here with you, fight with you, and legislate with you. If we want to build us, we start with us. I'm a proud sponsor of a bill that passed and now signed into law to include abortion care in the healthcare plans for our students in college. Did you know that was not available? I'm a proud prime sponsor for the bill that affirmed Washington Abortion Access Act that just passed this last session so that more of us who need the care have the care available. And it's not just women. It's all pregnant individuals. Why? Because that's who we are. We care for one another. We love one another. Regardless. That's who we are. And as a refugee coming from Vietnam, making this place my second home, that is my belief. My belief, the United States of America is a refuge for those who believe in freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so I'm here with you and make that commitment to always be with you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Saldana. I'm the proud state senator of the 37th Legislative District. And I'm honored to be with all of you here today. Handmaid's Tale is a book I read as a college student. It's not a reality I want to live in or one that I want for my children or for your children. And that is why we're standing up to speak out, and that is why I felt compelled to go to the state legislature in 2016. When I saw what was happening at the federal level and also across our country and state legislatures where the legislature was not representing the people, the global majorities, the majority population, which tends to be women. And it was not reflecting what democracy needed to be. When I got into the state Senate in 2017, we were in the minority. And so while we had good policy on the books, we weren't able to make advancements. And it wasn't until we doubled the women of color in our state Senate in 2017 that then State Senator Hobbs' legislation for updating and modernizing and protecting reproductive justice was able to get passed and sent to Governor Inslee's desk to get signed. Majorities matter, and even in Washington State, where the people have spoken up to make sure that women's rights are protected, that the right to abortion is real and legal and is supported with real budgets that'll make it actually accessible for people, that it is a slim majority, and that we can never, as we are trying to advance reproductive justice this year with our majorities, we are able to make sure that we are supporting doulas for all, that we are making sure that those that want to birth have real protection and support to have that be a healthy opportunity. And that once you're in this world, that you have an opportunity and a pathway to live out your dreams and have access to college and not have it burden you with debt. These are the dreams that we want for our people, but it requires that we make sure that we stand up and make sure that we do not allow things to roll back. So whatever happens in that Washington, we know that in this Washington, the people of Washington will make sure that our rights are protected, that the right to abortion is real, and that people like myself and my friends when we were in college had a place to go when we needed health care that was not going to ask questions and it was going to respect our dignity as women, as people that can get pregnant. So thank you so much. Let's stand up. Let's fight. Let's make sure that representation and majorities matter.
Thank you. My name is Lori Jenkins, Speaker of the House of Representatives. I am honored to be here today. How about this? I am honored to be here and to follow both Senator Saldana and Representative Tai and to have so many legislators here today and so many elected officials. But one of the things I want to start out with is please raise your hand if you are registered to vote. I want to start off with a thank you. A little bit over 30 years ago, when my friend Jan Bianchi and a small group of women sat down together and they said, Roe v. Wade will always be in jeopardy in that Washington unless we put it into law in this Washington. They wrote Initiative 120. They knew we had to have it in statute, and it is because of them and because of voters like every single one of you that Washington, time and time again, has protected and expanded a woman's right over her own body. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Washington is an incredibly solidly pro-choice state. But here's one of the things. You can have that choice theoretically, but if you don't really have access to health care, then you don't have that choice. And this is one of the things that the legislature continues to try and work on, and we will have to continue to try and work on it. Well over 50% of the geography of Washington state, women actually don't have access to abortion services in their local community. The bill that Representative Tai talked about that we passed this year, that was about making sure that we have health care providers everywhere in this state and that every health care provider who is trained to provide those services can provide those services so that we expand access to every woman in Washington, but also to the literally thousands of women who are going to flee to this state who need these services. I can tell you that the minute that decision comes down, the women of Idaho have lost everything in terms of their right to choose, right? And there are women all over this country who are going to lose that. And we, as we have been for so long in this state, will be a beacon of light and of help and of hope and of action for the women of this country. You have heard from everyone about how important it is to vote, how important it is to do this work. I'm just going to quote on behalf of the House Democrats, a lot of whom are here today, and the Senate Democrats, who usually I don't speak for at all. But what the heck? We'll see if somebody comes up and disagrees with me. I'm going to quote a great philosopher, or at least one one thing that he has to say is great philosophy. We won't back down. We won't get turned around. You can back us up to the gates of hell, and we will not back down. And now, my friend, for longer than we'd like to admit, because we both look very young, I know, for many, many years, Planned Parenthood Votes Washington CEO, Jennifer Allen.
Thank you all. I find myself extraordinarily moved in this moment by the support that we have in Washington, by the elected representatives that are standing here and are speaking out and standing strong and proud for abortion access. In Washington state, we are so lucky to have a majority of legislators, to have statewide leaders, not only those you've heard from, but Secretary of State Hobbs, Treasurer Mike Pelliciotti, and others. We have so many elected representatives at every level of government that support abortion because abortion is health care. In that spirit, I'd like to ask all of the elected representatives who are here today, who are standing strong for abortion, to hold up, raise your hands. Let us see how many folks we have standing here today. Thanks to each of you for the work you do. And thanks, too, to the healthcare providers who are here today. If you are a healthcare provider and you are here standing strong for abortion, raise your hand. Let us applaud you. Thank you. As Speaker Jenkins said, my name is Jennifer Allen, and I am the CEO of Planned Parenthood Alliance Advocates, which is the advocacy arm of Planned Parenthood. And we work in 6 states, but I couldn't be prouder than to live here in Washington. We're at a crisis moment. There's no denying it. If this opinion portends the future, it pretends a future that is dark and dangerous for women and people who can get pregnant everywhere. It pretends a future where over 36 million people in 26 states have no access to abortion. It pretends a future where those people, some of them can travel to states that already have inadequate safety nets. It pretends a future where many of them can't travel, where many of them are in danger. It pretends the past. It pretends a past we do not want to return to. And we know who will be most impacted. It's been said already today numerous times. It's the people who already have the least access to health care. It's the people who already have the worst health care outcomes who will be the most affected. It's people of color. It's low-income people. It's people in rural areas. It's LGBTQ people. It's people with disabilities. It is people who are the farthest from access to health care, whose access will be targeted by the bans that will go into effect if this is the Supreme Court's decision. In Washington, we don't accept that fate. We have stood strong over and over and over again to stand for abortion access. But that depends on elected leaders like the ones who are here today. And that depends on people who vote. I want to be clear, abortion is still legal. These are confusing times. Abortion has been chipped away. States have introduced bans. Members of Congress say all sorts of things. Not us. Not the ones that are here today. Members of Congress who would like for people to question whether there is still access to abortion. Members of Congress who seek to take away people's right to control their own bodies. It's a confusing time, so I say again, abortion is legal.
Abortion is available. People can still get abortions. We will stand in Washington for that right from now for as long as everyone who votes and stands up for that right continues to show up. We stand right now in Washington on the shoulders of generations. Speaker Jenkins mentioned the people who put together Initiative 120. And before that, Governor Inslee mentioned that we were the first state in the nation to enact access to abortion by a vote of the people in 1970. We stand on the shoulders of those people, but the generations ahead stand on our shoulders. So it's not time to feel despairing. It's not time to sit down. It's time to speak out. It's time to fight. It's time to mobilize. We have wonderful leaders who are here to support us, and we have to support them, and we have to support the generations ahead, and we have to show up to keep abortion safe and legal now and always. I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank the wonderful leaders here, and it is my honor to turn it back over to Governor Inslee.
Thank you. Just an amendment. Several of the speakers, every speaker I think, talked about the importance of voting, particularly in light of this pending Supreme Court evisceration of this American right. I do want to note, we are not advocating to vote for any particular person or party. But there is a reality we have to understand. Yes, abortion is available to Washingtonians today. Yes, we voted in 1970 to pass a law to make sure that it is available today. But we have to understand that the moment the Washington State Legislature came under the control of a party dedicated to take that right away from women, that right would be gone. So these legislative seats are incredibly important to keep. Our border is open with Idaho today. We want to keep it open. Our airports are open to women-owned services. We want to keep it open in our bus stations. To keep that right open, we have to elect people who will stand up for the right of women to have access to an abortion. Now, before I close, there's a person I wanted to come up here. There's a person over here in a pink hat. There's 2 points on it. Could you come up here just for a minute, please? Come on up here in this pink hat here. Every day, as governor of the state of Washington, I have a particular right. When I meet somebody who's really inspired me, who's got me thinking they can do something really powerful, I can make them Washingtonian of the day. And when I do that, I take off my governor's pin. What is your name? Lene
Kibbiger.
Lene Kibbiger has inspired me because I know she's going to go back and she's going to find out every young person who could spend their day on the couch in November. Instead, she's going to get them to vote. Today's Washingtonian of the day. Lene Kibbiger. Okay, questions? All of the speakers will be happy to take your questions. If you want to direct them to anyone, go ahead. Questions? Anybody with softball questions? From the media. Let's take the media questions first. If there's any media questions.
Question for the governor.
Yeah.
Do you expect a potential influx into the state? Do you anticipate the state expanding facilities, or what could that access look like for people coming from other states?
So we are already, the question was, do we anticipate expanding the institutions that can provide services with an influx from out of state? The answer is yes, we do anticipate there will be an influx. We have already, through both the state and Planned Parenthood, expanded those facilities. It's my anticipation we will continue to have to develop resources to get that job done. And I think you heard the legislators who are committed to making sure those services are available. So I'm confident they will be available in the state of Washington. Yeah, from the media. Any questions from the media? Please. Thank you.
What about the Catholic marker of hospitals?
that a concern? Is that anything that you can address?
The question is about mergers in our hospitals. Is that a concern? Yes, it is a concern. We have to make sure that this is not just a paper right, it is a right in reality to get these services. So it is something we do have some concerns about. We'll have more discussion in the days to come. Media. We're going to go to the media. We'll take your private questions. Otherwise, going once, going twice. Yes.
You talked about exploring a change in the state constitution.
Yes.
What would that look like? What would it say?
Well, I think you're going to hear discussion with our leaders about how to make sure that we have a constitutional right that is enshrined in our own Constitution. There are two ways to get that done. One, the state Supreme Court could rule that that right exists under our pre-existing right of privacy, our own version of Roe versus Wade. That is a possible route to get this job done. It involves litigation, it involves some time. An alternative route would be to amend our Constitution in the state of Washington to make this very, very specific. Now, to do that, we would have to have at least the current situation, the help of some Republicans, which doesn't appear to be in existence at the moment. Would be nice, wouldn't it, to have more officer holders who would vote for a constitutional amendment in Washington State to preserve the right of choice? I think that'd be a great idea. So we'll be talking about, yes. The question was about providing support for women who are Americans outside the state to get services. It is my belief that this is a right that Americans deserve protection. Washington State has always been a state who's willing to stand up for Americans, not just ourselves, and I know legislators will be looking for options in that regard. Okay, anything else? Thank you very much. Let's go vote. Good luck.